Hello, beautiful. Welcome back to Music and Beauty TV. If you haven't already subscribed, please do so before you leave. Thank you so much. As you can see by the title of this video, we're about to talk about laying tracks and flipping tracks. Right now, what you're looking at is a piece of my last video, or one of my last videos, where I did a full head tutorial on this look. And in that video, I said I was going to have shorter versions going over in more depth and detail some of the things I discussed. Flipping tracks was one of those. This is a very important technique to have down when you're doing weaves, and I had nobody to straight up teach me this. I looked all over YouTube. I didn't find any specific tutorials on it, so I kind of developed some techniques on my own based on just my experiences. I want to help you guys cut your learning curve in half by studying this video, so follow along, okay? We're gonna get started in the back of the head with laying the first track. Now, I went over this method in the last video, so you can click on this link to see that full video, and I'll just talk about it again right now. This first track, laying at the bottom, sometimes people start from like the top of the ear to the other ear, and sometimes people start from the bottom of the ear to ear. Wherever you want to start, I recommend doing an underhand stitch all the way across, because this allows the track that you're working with to kind of sit underneath the braid, so that if this person lifts it up, you don't see the braid all exposed. The track and the hair is gonna kind of cover it. That's what I'm doing right here. Now, what you'll notice in this video is I'm gonna go back and forth between laying tracks and flipping tracks, just discussing different techniques, different things that go with it, because it is a very tedious process, but once you get it down, it's all good. My objective is to teach you guys how to lay a neat, flat, and durable sewing, okay? So, this is the first portion where we're flipping the track over. Now, one of the first things that I'll say about flipping tracks is you want it to be flat, okay? A lot of people flip tracks, and I think this is where some of the bulkiness comes in with weaves. Keep in mind that you pretty much want your track to hug the braid. However you go about flipping your track, you want the track to like fold over the braid, so that once you're finished stitching, it lays flat on top of it. You don't necessarily want to just pull the track from side to side, and what you'll experience when you're on your way up the head is a lot of bulkiness. But you see right there, like how my thumb is laying on it, it's flat. Because what I did, I folded the track over the braid. So like I took the track all the way to the left, and I folded it over the entire braid and then started stitching. I hope that makes sense. Get in somebody's head and start practicing, you'll see what I mean. As you can see, when I'm laying tracks, I don't always stick the needle through the weft. It's not really necessary. I used to do that when I was more of an amateur, but now I realize you can have a secure weave by not going through the weft every time, but once in a while, like so. You gotta do it, you gotta stick it through the track and loop it, knot it. That way it doesn't go anywhere. Some people, they never go through the weft at all. And I think a lot of times, like, that's how you end up with a situation as the weave is growing out and it begins to loosen. The more that you're pulling on it, the more that you're styling it, you start to feel like your weave is loose. I can tell you, rarely ever do I have anybody that has a loose stitch or any piece hanging. That's rare. I'll say 99%, because it does happen once in a blue moon. But this is the method that I use, and it works foolproof, so that's why I'm recommending it to you. Pretty sure there are other women out there with other methods, but this is what I'm showing you. So now, when we get to the edge of this track right here, I just want to show you guys that every time I go from edge to edge, ear to ear, I think it is important to do a secure knot at that end, okay? Sometimes you'll have a client come back for a touch-up or a tighten. Sometimes you may have to make some changes to someone's weave. If every 3 to 5 stitches you're sticking the needle through the weft and tying a knot, that pretty much gives you a start and stop point. That way, if you end up having to cut a track to make an adjustment, you don't have to unravel the entire thread that went through everything, because you have at least one portion that has been secure and in place. And once you start doing weaves, or if you're already doing weaves and you do this method, you'll see exactly what I mean. It'll make a lot more sense, okay? So moving on, I want to show you guys an example of when you want to flip a track and you want to go from side to side in somewhat of a straight line, but you need to flip the track. So what I'll do is I'll just pull the track up just a little bit higher than where I actually want to drag it, and I'll do a stitch right there, I'll fold it over to where it hugs the braid and kind of comes down at a slight angle. I'll secure that in place. And what you'll notice, rule of thumb, is when you do it this way is you'll notice a little loose flap. That's good. The first stitch, you just need to make sure that you folded it over correctly, that it's hugging the braid correctly, it's at a slight angle downward. Just stick that first stitch through and then go back to secure the rest of it so that the flap doesn't remain. Some people probably do this and they probably don't go back and secure the rest of it. I do, just because even though I know that the braid's not going to go anywhere, it kind of makes the client uncomfortable and makes the client feel like their hair is loose, and I don't like that. So I just take the extra step. But if I lay my hands over it, it's flat. You do that over and over and over, you're able to go across the head horizontally with just having slightly angled flips at the edges, but no one will ever be able to tell. I wanted to talk a little bit about laying tracks. As you can see from what I just moved, I've got about almost like 1.5 inches space in between every track right now. And like I said, that's because I'm doubling her wefts. So we're back at the other side and we are going to do another flip. Now I want to show you guys something else. Now in this case, this braid all the way to the left is very skinny. Sometimes, especially when you have double wefts and you go about flipping a track over a really skinny braid, sometimes that can feel a little bulky. And because I'm going up and because this braid is skinny, I'm just gonna kind of pull these tracks over. This one is not gonna really hug the braid. I'm gonna immediately start my first stitch on the next braid over. But I wish you guys were here to feel how flat this was. Because the wefts are doubled and that braid is skinny, the direction that I'm pulling it, it's going to lay really flat. Especially, you always have to consider when you're flipping tracks that there's going to be a whole bunch of layers of more tracks on top of it. So as long as you have like a consistent flow to what you're doing and nothing is just like straight up stand out bulky, all that stuff at the bottom is going to get covered up anyway because there's going to be so much hair on top. So right now what I want to show you guys is how I attach the thread to the braid. There's a couple ways that you can secure the thread to the head so that you can stitch. Now you can do what I'm doing right now, where I basically stick the needle through the braid and around the weft and then stick the needle through the loop in the thread and just secure it. That ain't going nowhere. So that's a very quick and simple way to do it. Every once in a while you'll come across an instance where you'll feel like it's best to stick the needle directly through the weft or the wefts if you're doubling them up. And in that case, then you'll do like I'm showing you right now, and as long as your knot is really tight and secure, sometimes people double knot just to make sure, but as long as you got that knot there, it ain't gonna go nowhere either. I used to always do it this way, but I've proceeded to doing it the other way because I just feel like it's a lot quicker. As you can see, I was struggling to get that needle through the weft, and sometimes people bring you wefts that got glue on them, they want to seal them, you know what I'm saying? Like, speaking of which, just so I can add a little 2 cents about that, a lot of times sealed wefts are hard as heck to stick your needle through. If you're an intermediate to expert stylist, you know exactly what I'm talking about, and I hate that. Thumbs this video up if you hate that too. Moving on. Right now, I'm going to show you guys how to flip a track in the middle of the head. Now, I don't know if every stylist does this, but I'm pretty sure you run across this sometimes. This client is getting a side part weave, and one of the things I like to do with clients who I'm doubling their wefts is when I get to the top of their weave, I like to single the wefts out, and sometimes I even cut the ends once I get to the top few tracks just to make sure everything's laying flat. That being the case, once I get up there, I need everything to be parallel at that point. I won't be flipping anymore so much, and even if I am flipping, those tracks are going to be so close together, I need it to be parallel. So sometimes when I'm in the middle of the head, I'll need to flip in the middle so that I can create a straight line that goes from one side of the head to the other side. Hopefully you can tell what I mean by this visual. Anyway, when I'm flipping tracks in the middle of the head, what I usually like to do is I like to find space in between the braids. When you don't have space in between the braids, it makes this almost impossible to do flatly. But when you do, which oftentimes you do, you're able to loop this needle through the bottom portion of one of the braids, which is going to be like the top braid above the space that you're using, and lay this track as such. Feel around for the flat test, make sure it always works out. But like I said, I utilize the space in between the braid. Now here's another case. This is a very specific thing. I don't know if anybody else does this, but it is something that I do. Right now, I know that I'm about to flip this track. Why? Because I'm doing a style on a client where she said that she likes to pull her hair behind her ear. I have enough of this weft left to where if I pull that up right there and she goes to pull it behind her ear, she's going to experience some bulkiness. I have experience enough to know that. So I want to flip this track. And I'm always a little sketchy when it comes to flipping tracks along these really skinny braids on the perimeter that are facing the face. But in this case, I turned it over, I felt it, I seen that I was going to be able to do it flatly, so I proceeded as such. In this case though, what I will do sometimes is what I'm showing you right now. I'll have to stick the needle through and I'll loop it all the way around this skinny braid, and then I'll stick it directly through one of the wefts, the bottommost weft that is right there attached to that braid. And the reason why is because when I flip this, I almost want to like do a half flip. It's like it's flipped, but I created almost like a little space. It's really hard to describe what it is, but I created this little space so that when I flip it, it's flat. Like I said, get your hands dirty. Just do it one time and you'll see exactly what I mean. Because if I would have tried to flip both of them, it would have been more bulky. This is almost like, what this is doing is it's creating a situation very similar to where if the wefts were not doubled. Because if the wefts were not doubled, I would only be flipping one track. Well, this is allowing me to do something that feels like I flipped one track even though the wefts are doubled. Does that make sense? So what I did in this situation was, once I flip that over, I'm holding it down with my fingers, and then I'm going to take the thread and I'm going to loop it through just one of the strands of the braid right next to it, and then looping it through. And I'm going to go back to the small braid, and at that point, I'm going to loop it through the actual weft, because if you can tell, it's like was still moving around as I was securing it right there. So I have to do this final stitch to make sure that it actually stays flat and stays in place. Because like I said, when these weaves start growing out, stuff start moving around and look cute at first, but you got to make sure that they're going to stay in place. And I always make sure not to pull too tightly. Even if it may look tight, I check with my clients throughout the process to make sure that it doesn't feel too tight, because I'm not into pulling out edges. You feel me? Thumbs this video up if you're not into pulling out edges either. So I'm going to proceed. Now here is an example of laying tracks where you're sticking the needle through the weft every time. When I first started doing weaves, this is what I did all the time. And this weft is single, so it's easier to do it when you're working with a single weft. It's easier to do it when you're working with wefts that come from the beauty supply. This hair right here is virgin hair. A lot of times when people bring virgin hair, they seal the wefts, or the wefts are so thick that it's hard to get that needle through. You're doubling the wefts, it's hard to get the needle through. But if you're dealing with wefts that are simple to get through and this is just your style, this is definitely a secure way to lay tracks. It's just not something I think is necessary all the time. Another thing, when you're sticking the needle through the weft every single time, sometimes that can cause shedding depending on the type of hair you're working with. So you got to be careful and have that conversation with your clients. And as you can see, now that I'm working with single wefts, there's only about a little bit more than ½ inch of space in between each weft. So since I'm up towards the top, that's really important too, because if the wind blows, you don't want a whole bunch of gaps in the hair. Toward the bottom, especially when it's going to be covered up with a whole bunch of hair, it really doesn't make a big difference. But you have to have that discernment and just have that experience when you're installing weaves, and you can make that judgment for yourself. Just know that there are variations to the space in between wefts and the way that you lay them, based on the client, based on the hairstyle, based on the amount of bundles you're using. There's always a variation. You can ask me any details that you want to know below, and I'll do my best to get back to you as soon as possible. And if you want any more specific type videos, then thumbs this video up and comment below. Now I'm going to move on to showing you guys how I laid the top track to a weave. I put the needle through the track first. In this case, this is important to me because now that I'm at the top, I don't want a whole bunch of straggly thread exposed. Now I'm going to stick my needle through that loop. You know how when you put a braid in, there's always that first loop, and then back through the track right there at the edge of that track, and then add a secure stitch, a secure knot right there. So now you have placement, a sturdy placement to get started with this track. Now there are a couple ways that people do this top track. There's probably a few different ways. I'm gonna show you a couple. You can proceed by doing the overhand stitch or underhand stitch and not sticking the needle directly through the weft. You can wrap the needle around the entire braid since it's so skinny, or you can just wrap the needle around one strand of the braid. Now me, I'm personally in favor most of the time with sticking the needle through the weft on this top track. This to me just is the most secure way. I don't have to worry about gaps in between. I know that it's secure, super secure, because the needle's through the weft every single time. And by doing it the way I do it, where I only stick the needle through the topmost one strand of the braid, then I know that I'm creating a situation where this weft is gonna sit flatly on top of the braid. And then once I get to the end, then I'm gonna make sure that I just cut off the excess. You gotta kind of cut right there. You don't wanna cut all that work that you did. You don't wanna cut the thread, but you gotta cut right after, because you also don't wanna have weft hanging out, you know, so pay close attention to this part. And then sticking it through that front loop and directly through the track again. And in this part, this is just a little hack that I do sometimes after I do that little secure knot. I'll stick the needle through maybe about 1/2 inch over through the top of that and then underneath it and pull it out. And I'll make that my final stitch, because every time you cut the thread, you want to leave about 1/2 inch to 1 inch of thread hanging, so that when the client goes to cut their weave out, then they know where the thread is at. You know what I'm saying? You don't want to cut the thread right at the knot. That also leaves a lot of potential for that knot to unravel. But because I don't want any thread hanging, then I try to leave that hanging piece underneath. And this is what it looks like in the end. You see how that weft is secure, it's sitting on top of the braid, you don't see any braid sticking out. And this goes for both ways of doing it. So pick your preference, be consistent. Most importantly, check for flatness and check for no visibility of those braids. That is the end of my little tutorial on flipping tracks and laying tracks. Let me know if you guys have any questions. I hope I covered all the basics, and I hope that this helps to speed up your learning curve, your experience when slaying these weaves. Thank you so much for subscribing to Music and Beauty TV. I've got a ton of tutorials on the way, so stay tuned. Follow me on all my social media. God bless, and stay beautiful, ladies. Stay confidently beautiful.